What's good, YouTube? In this tutorial, I'll be going over these 3 rotoscope transitions you can be using for your music videos. Okay, so in After Effects, I have these 3 clips playing from Cowboy's I Shine music video. And in order to get started, I'm going to go to the first clip and I'm going to double click it and select the rotoscope tool, and I'm going to rotoscope or mask out Cowboy. So once it's done freezing, you go back into the composition and then you have your masked out subject. And what you want to do is get that same layer and Control D, duplicate it and make that the background layer and get rid of the roto brush effect for that layer. So I'm going to name this I Shine background just to make it easier. And now in order to get that background slide effect, I'm going to add an effect called offset to that background layer. And remember, that's the background layer without the rotoscope, and the one on top is the rotoscope layer. So what I'm going to do is keyframe the shift center to and make this 18 frames long, because I don't want the slide in transition to happen too quick or too slow. So I want this to be 18 frames long. Go back to the beginning and I'm gonna have it slide from left to right. So shift the center to 10,000 by 540 and get those keyframes and easy ease them. This is what we have so far. And when it comes to the offset effect, motion blur actually doesn't work. So in order to create that motion blur, I'm going to add an effect called CC Force motion blur, and as you guys can see, the motion blur is applied, so it's important to add the CC Force motion blur. So I'm gonna have the motion blur samples at 50 for the value, and then what we're gonna do is go to the subject and keyframe the position. So I'm gonna keyframe it and make it 8 frames long. Then make sure to have the subject out of the composition at the beginning. Grab those keyframes and then you want to easy ease them, and just like that we have a rotoscope transition, but it doesn't look as smooth as we want it to. So make sure to modify your graph editors. I'm going to have it come in really fast in the beginning and then animate slow. So I'm going to do the same thing for the position. And just like that, that's the first rotoscope transition. Okay, so now for the second rotoscope transition, what I'm going to do is rotoscope the subject. So what I'm going to do is make sure the subject is rotoscope and then hit the freeze button, and then it's going to lock in the rotoscope of the subject. Okay, so now we have the rotoscope subjects. So you want to then duplicate that layer and make sure you get rid of the rotoscope for the layer that's underneath. And to make it easier, I'm going to name that BG for background. This is the rotoscope layer. So this is the rotoscope layer on the top. And what we want to do is duplicate this layer once again and get rid of the rotoscope effect for that layer, and then freeze frame that layer, and I'm gonna make it 9 frames long. And to make it easier, I'm gonna name that layer freeze frame, and then I'm gonna get this layer and make sure it overlaps the layer from before, and then you get the freeze frame layer, and then I'm gonna mask out the subject using the pen tool. Once you have your subject masked out, what I'm going to do is animate the position and make sure it's out of the composition. Animate it at 1303 and then have it animated in back to the original composition. Easy ease those keyframes, and just like that, we have the first part of the transition. And you want to make sure you have your motion blur on in order to have a seamless transition from the first scene to the second scene. What I'm going to do is grab the first 2 layers and pre-compose the layers. Make sure it's at move all attributes into the new composition, and then I'm going to add motion tile to this pre-comp layer. Change the name to make it easier. Have the output width at 400 and then output height at 400. Make sure to click mirror edges. Keyframe the tile center at the beginning of the freeze frame from the second clip, and then keyframe the tile center at 960 and negative 2445. Make sure to move that last keyframe to the end of the clip, and then easy ease the keyframes and have your motion blur on. And then in order to have the backgrounds blend in more and to have that seamless transition from the first scene to the second scene, what I'm going to do is add the motion tile effect to the background scene of the second clip. Do the same thing, have the output width and the output height at 400, mirror edges, and then keyframe the tile center as the same values as scene 1, but make sure that the keyframes are flipped. So first keyframe of the motion tile for the second clip, you want to have keyframe at 960 and negative 2445, and then you want to have it end at its original position. And then grab those keyframes, easy ease them, make sure you have your motion blur on for that layer, and then go to scene 1, get the keyframes for the motion tile and have it animate slow in the beginning and then animate out fast. And then go to the second clip and get the keyframe for the motion tile and have it come in fast in the beginning and then slow. And now we have this really smooth transition from the first scene to the second scene. Now for this final rotoscope transition, what I'm going to do is mask out the subject. So once you have the subject masked out, you duplicate that layer and make sure to freeze frame that layer. And then since I'm going to have this scene be a really fast transition, make the layer 3 frames long and move it to the front. And then in order for the subject to be one color, I'm going to add an effect called fill, and I'm going to make the color white. And then I'm going to add a glow effect to it, and I'm going to make the glow radius 40 and then the intensity 2.5. It's important to duplicate the rotoscope layer and have it on top of the background layer and get rid of the rotobrush effect for the background layer. So what we have here so far is a flash effect, and it cuts to the third scene. And to add even more energy to this transition, I'm going to duplicate this layer and get rid of the fill and the glow and have it cut into the next scene. So, and then I'm going to have this rotoscope transition. And then what I'm going to do is add an adjustment layer and make that 6 frames long. Add an effect called exposure. Then make sure to keyframe the exposure where the cut happens or where the transition happens. I'm going to keyframe the exposure at 3. And then go to the beginning of that adjustment layer and keyframe back to 0. Go to the end and keyframe that at 0. And then I'm going to add an effect called directional blur. And then I'm going to keyframe the blur length at 80. And then go to the beginning of the adjustment layer and keyframe it at 0. And go towards the end, keyframe that to 0. Make sure to grab those keyframes and ease them. And then I'm going to go into the graph editor and make it go fast, and then make it go slow, and then fast, and then slow. And make sure to do the same for the exposure. Go slow, and then fast, and then slow. So there you have it. That's the final rotoscope transition. And then when I play all 3 transitions at the same time, there's just a really seamless transition throughout all the clips. So there you guys have it. I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. If there's any tutorial suggestions that you guys have, please leave a comment down below, and make sure to hit the like and subscribe button, and I'll see you guys in the next video.